There's a trick to breathing on approach. Slow through the teeth. Just enough pressure behind the breath to feel the mask seal hold. It's not about oxygen. It's about control. If the seal hisses, you've got time. If it whistles, it's too late. This one didn't hiss. It stuttered. I adjusted the clamp on my faceplate, thumbed the side vent and listened again. Still stuttering. Bad omen. Gravity's light, I muttered, voice dull through the transducer. Hull reads flexing 1.2 degrees off standard. Torsion stress or internal swell. Can't tell yet. Branic didn't answer right away. He never did. The man moved like he thought time was a blade, and stillness kept him from bleeding. He stood beside me at the airlock, one hand tapping the reinforced ring around the entry hatch, knuckles against ceramic alloy. "Deck hates us," he said finally. "Walk like it." That was as close to friendly advice as Branic Dell gave anyone. Behind us the docking tube groaned, compressed coupling bolts locking to the Artemis Solace's outer skin. I watched the readouts stutter again. Minor anomalies, the ship's AI said. Standard integration drift. Nothing to log, nothing to worry about. Except this ship shouldn't be answering at all. She had gone silent 6 months back. Full systems dead. Lost near a dead star called the Cinder Point. Black dwarf territory, uncharted and supposedly empty. Now she was back. Drifting, running dark but warm. Enough to worry someone at Osiris Gate conglomerate. Enough to buy a cleanup crew. Enough to buy us. 4 bodies, no backups. A patch job team on a rental cutter called Sparrowhawk. No official designation. No ownership trail that couldn't be disavowed. Just 4 names on a blinking brief. I was the lead. Osric Vane, freelance recovery contractor, 42 years old, 10,000 hours logged in 0G ops, 63 completed retrievals, 6 known failures, 18 bodies lost. That last number never updated, not because it didn't grow, just because I'd stopped counting. The comm line clicked as our last 2 caught up, mag boots scraping over the hull surface with uneven rhythm. I had to recalibrate Polly twice, Merrick Skell said as he clambered up the tube lip. She doesn't like the gravity gradient. Too much flex. Whole ship's breathing. I hate it when they breathe. Polly wasn't a person. She was his scanner, a hacked-up biochemical sniffer rigged from 6 different makes, its casing scorched and half exposed from years of duct tape field repairs and corrosive exposure. Skell had once led a quarantine op that went sideways. Corporate silence after, like nothing happened. He didn't talk about it, but every time he checked Polly, it wasn't for data. It was to remind himself he still had control. Some part of him thought control would save us. Skell treated her like a partner, talked to her like a lover, trusted her more than people. "You say that every time," I said. "That's because everything breathes crooked, Vane, especially after it's died once." Vekman came next. Silent until his boots caught the edge of the hatch and he staggered, mumbling something about the slope being off. He stared at the seam where the deck met the wall, brushing fingers along the surface like he was reading Braille. 2.5-degree incline, he murmured. Not sag, reformed intentionally. It's not damaged, it's being redesigned. The Artemis Solace had been a luxury liner, top tier, corporate owned. Used to ferry the wealthier kinds of tourists past the rim of known space. Massive rotating gardens, gold-trimmed promenade decks, gravity pools, zero-pressure spas, the kind of thing built to flaunt human arrogance at the void. Now she looked like a corpse wired up for a funeral. Elegant bones draped in fungus metal. Alloy had swelled like diseased tissue around her joints. Seam lines squirmed like healed-over wounds. We docked at what used to be the starboard personnel airlock. The registry still blinked with an old greeting hologram. "Welcome to the Artemis Solace. Journey beyond the stars, with all the comforts of home." Except the image didn't flicker. It rippled like light passing through oil. And her voice, still cheerful, was speaking out of order. Different words from different decks. Like someone had spliced her into fragments and spread her across the hull like a prayer wheel. "Airlock's live," I said finally. Seal integrity's questionable but holding. Gravity patchy, mostly localized. Atmosphere, I sniffed, which was stupid through the mask, but instinct doesn't care about logic. Thick, like blood in the pipes, smells synthetic. High carbon mix, irritant residue. Skell was already checking Polly again. Yeah, there's biopresence, minimal active pathogens, no airborne particulates I can isolate, but the signature's corrupted. Branic grunted, impatient. He hit the lock override. The hatch opened without sound. No hiss, no vacuum pull, just a clean, almost delicate slide, as if the ship had wanted to let us in. I'd seen airlocks jam under pressure or pop open in zero-G drift, but I'd never seen one open like it had manners. Inside was dim. The light came from the walls, not fixtures. Veins of chemical tracer filaments threaded along the surfaces, spiraling in repeating, recursive patterns, like vines or circuitry. The floor's plating had melted at the edges, joined with the walls into a single continuous mass. No right angles left. Everything curved. We stepped in, and then we saw them. Figures. Not hiding, not attacking, just working. 3 of them. Human shapes. Or what had been human. One was stacking oxygen tanks and nutrient packs in a spiral tower near a broken airlock. His arms moved in slow, precise arcs guided by pattern. His eyes were gone, hollowed or fused shut. His arms had been opened surgically or otherwise to reveal cybernetic reinforcement beneath tendon and bone. The muscles jerked and locked with every motion, like a marionette held upright by invisible strings. He didn't react to us, didn't stop, just kept stacking, like the act of rearranging mass into meaningless towers was keeping something at bay or building toward it. Merrick moved forward. Too fast. Back, I hissed. Too late. The figure's head snapped toward us. His body didn't turn, but his limbs moved with sudden, brutal efficiency. One arm knocked the tower sideways in a burst of kinetic force, sending tanks crashing like bones. His other arm clamped down on a sharp fragment of paneling, raising it like a tool or a weapon. Branic didn't wait. His Gauss sidearm hissed twice, one in the leg to disable, one in the shoulder. The man dropped, twitched, lay still. I moved to his side, crouched low, looked closer. His skin was semi-translucent where it had stretched around implants. His breath was slow, shallow. There was no expression, no pain, just shallow, autonomous respiration and a tremor along his left hand, which still twitched as if stacking. "Alive?" Vec asked behind me. There were no screams, no pleas, no madness. This wasn't infection, wasn't berserker syndrome or black site neurodegradation. These people weren't mad. They were still working for something else. "This ship didn't fail," I said aloud. "She was taken. And now she's building something," Vec whispered. I turned to him. His eyes were fixed on the ceiling, on the wall, on the seams. He reached into his coat and pulled his notebook. Old school, leather-bound, pages yellowed and ragged from overuse. He started sketching. "Symmetry," he murmured. "Nested sequences. Directional load paths redirected into symmetrical gridwork. This is intentional." Branic stepped past us, checked the corridor ahead. "Clear. No hostiles, just more of them. Builders." I could feel the moment then, the silence, like the ship had felt us dock, like it had paused to listen. "Vain," Skell said quietly. "We're not in a derelict." "No," I said, and I meant it. "We're inside something becoming." The body we'd downed didn't decay. 2 hours after we breached the Artemis Solace, I went back to check him. His wounds hadn't clotted. They hadn't bled properly either. The tissue just held, like the trauma had been catalogued but not treated. No necrosis, no inflammation. The body didn't seem to recognize it had been damaged. The limbs still twitched in slow arcs, fingers curling and uncurling, trying to grasp for phantom tools, trying to keep working. We didn't speak about it much. We should have. Instead, we moved. We pushed deeper. I logged our path in my suit's nav core as we went, but it barely mattered. The ship didn't follow her original design anymore. Even with structural schematics projected against my visor, the hallways curved where they should have run straight. Junctions were missing. Some doors led to walls. Others opened to rooms that shouldn't have fit inside their dimensions. Some of those rooms were occupied. We found the bellwoman by accident. She didn't come from a hallway. She came through one, dragging herself out of a collapsed service corridor, half her frame hidden by a bulkhead peeled open like an incision. She wore a passenger service uniform once, still pristine in places, scarlet epaulettes perfectly folded, nameplate half dissolved. Her jaw was gone. Surgically removed, the flesh around the socket sealed with translucent polymer. From the neck emerged a cluster of small pale ports, like flower buds pulsing in sequence. She dragged a broken communications console behind her. It was fused to her spine. Wiring trailed behind like a bridal veil. Every 10 steps she paused and tapped the device against the wall. Then she moved on. She didn't react to us, didn't turn, didn't slow. Vec whispered, "She's mapping. She's not lost. She's marking." "Marking what?" Branic asked. Vec didn't answer. Branic raised his rifle, sights locked to the base of her skull. His hand was steady, but I saw the hesitation in his stance. You learn to read these things in combat zones. He was already weighting outcomes, threats, containment cost. "She hasn't engaged," I said low. "Doesn't need to. She's connected," Branic replied. "She sees, or something sees through her." I stepped between them. "Lower it." He didn't move at first. Then his finger twitched. The barrel dipped, only slightly. "Next time one of them runs a wire through your crew," he muttered, "you'll wish you pulled the trigger." Skell had been silent. He was crouched, pointing Polly at the smears along the wall, residue left behind by the bellwoman's passing. He ran 2 fingers across the smear and held them up to his visor, lenses humming as they magnified and filtered light. Residual enzyme breakdown, mimetic biogel. Whoever rewired her didn't do it manually. They seeded her, trained her like muscle memory. "You saying it's viral?" "No." Skell stood. His voice was dry. "I'm saying it's instructional. The way a fungus teaches a tree how to rot in a spiral." That was the moment I wanted to leave. I didn't say it, but I felt it settle in my gut like cold lead. I'm not a coward. You don't last long in salvage running away from corpses. But this wasn't rot. It wasn't madness. It was intention. I know what ships look like after a fire, or a breach, or sabotage. You can feel the chaos in the bones, the failure, the entropy. This wasn't that. This was ordered. We kept moving. The ship's hydroponic gardens were located along the mid-spine decks, once meant to sustain long-duration missions without resupply. Every liner this size carried its own food and oxygen production loops, maintained through high-efficiency phototubes and nutrient-fed greenery. The Solace was supposed to have state-of-the-art vertical biofarming bays. We found them fused shut. The main access doors had melted at the seams. Fused, like the material decided to forget it had ever been separate. Branic forced them open with a 2-step breaching charge and his exo-rig. The deck shook when it cracked. Inside was worse, no light fixtures, no trace of standard hydroponic layout. The air shimmered with spore motes thick enough to taste. My filters hissed as they ramped to maximum cycle. The greenery was gone. In its place were mats of fibrous black growths, vine-like cables studded with dull silver nodules. They weren't dead. They flexed slightly in the ambient heat. Some opened when we passed, releasing silent puffs of pale mist. "Watch the spores," Skell said, raising Polly. "If the filters fail, your blood becomes fertilizer." "Could they have started as food crops?" Vec asked. "Could have started as people," Skell muttered. The walls sweated, not moisture, something oilier, thin films of black gloss that carried a chemical sweetness. I didn't want to name the smell, but it reminded me of autopsy labs, too clean to be rot, too assembled to be anything alive. We moved carefully. The central garden basin was no longer a garden. It had become a nest. Layers of tubing, scaffolding, exo-metal struts, and what looked like repurposed bones had been arranged in concentric circles. At the center was a pedestal. On it lay a body. Torso opened, ribs pinned outward like a diagram. Organs gone. Replaced with a meshwork of printed metal and restructured flesh strands. Still warm. Still twitching. Vec leaned in too close. He sketched again, fast, breathless. His voice came in a low stammer. Symmetry. They're trying to say something. It's a syntax, like grammar. These patterns. Back off, Branic snapped. He hauled Vec back by the collar. Vec fought it at first, just a moment, then he froze. I watched the realization hit him, the understanding, the fear behind it. I wasn't thinking, he whispered. It felt important. That's how it starts, Skell said. Curiosity is the first symptom. I signaled for retreat. We left the gardens. Back in the corridor, I paused. Just a moment, just to listen. The solace made no sound, but the walls were warm, and the air felt like breath on the back of the neck. We set camp at the core spire's entry junction. 4 of us in a hex seal field, rotating watches. No one spoke much. Vec hadn't sketched again. Skell ran a chemical purge cycle on every filter we had. Branic sharpened his blades, not because he needed to, because it was the only sound he could control. I checked the nav again, logged our findings, annotated with red warning glyphs. Then I opened a private log. Mission Day 2. Internal structure continues to shift. Recommend no further teams be sent. This isn't salvageable. This isn't mechanical. We've seen 10 altered crew members so far, only 2 engaged. No direct aggression. That's what scares me. They're not hunting, they're building. And they don't need us to finish it. I don't think this was an accident. I think the ship found something near the cinder point, or something found her. We're not on the Artemis Solace anymore. We're inside its cocoon. Then I turned off the log, sat in silence and listened to the pattern Branic was tapping against the floor with his boot. Same beat, over and over. The same rhythm the bellwoman used. There's something that happens to your inner ear when gravity isn't constant. You stop trusting the floor, start listening to the bones in your feet more than your balance, like walking on a frozen lake that isn't quite frozen. The Solace had been toying with gravity for hours now. No pattern I could trace, just gentle shifts. A hallway would slope sideways, then feel lighter. Your gut would lurch half a beat before your boots corrected. Not enough to fall, just enough to wear you down, like seasickness laced into the architecture. We'd spent the last 6 hours tracing the central spire corridor. On the original schematics, it had been the heart of the Artemis Solace, an atrium running vertically through 7 decks, connecting passenger promenade levels, luxury stargazing lounges, and the observation plaza at the ship's apex. It was designed to be a spectacle, transparent alloy walls to view distant stars, climate-controlled with faint simulated breezes, even ambient soundscapes meant to evoke earth gardens. Now it was a column of quiet ruin. We entered it from below. Deck 12, engineering access point. The moment we breached the chamber, we stopped moving. All of us. The air wasn't thick, it wasn't toxic, but it resisted us. There's a kind of silence you only get in vacuum-sealed compartments. The sound doesn't disappear. It becomes internal. You hear your own blood, your suit flex, the micro-motors in your boots adjusting weight. But this wasn't that. This was pressure. Not mechanical. Conceptual. The plaza had changed. Instead of a hollow viewing tower, it had become something else, an organ. The walls were no longer clear. They had been layered over with intricate structural overlays, folded struts, radial beams and strands of memory alloys stretched in curves like spiderwebs dipped in mercury. At first I thought it was damage. Then I saw the symmetry, the interleaving nodes, the way beams converged toward a central point, a nexus above us, strung like the heart of a great antenna. This is signal amplification, Vec said quietly. He approached forward, boots hissing on the plated deck. His body moved without his usual hesitation, like gravity had adjusted just for him. "They're building something that can speak back," he murmured. "Something big enough to be heard across interstellar distance. A conceptual language carrier." He stopped walking. His eyes had drifted up. His voice trembled. "Look at the pattern density, the frequency nodal points. This is..." He didn't finish the thought, just stared. Sketchpad limp in one hand, eyes glassy. Branic put a hand on his shoulder and turned him. "Out, now!" "No!" Vex snapped, sharper than I'd ever heard him. "You don't get it. This whole thing, it's communicating through design, through arrangement. It's not random. This is intentional syntax, a message. If I can finish mapping the harmonic sequences..." "Then what?" Branic growled. "You gonna talk back?" Vec didn't blink. "I think it already understands me." Branic moved without warning. Hard shove. Vec hit the floor and scrambled backward like he'd been burned. Branic didn't advance, just stared down at him, breathing hard. "No more sketching. Not here. Not near that thing." I watched Vec. His chest rose fast. His fingers twitched, searching the floor for a pencil that wasn't there. I knelt beside him. "Vec," I said, calm. "You said it's communicating, that it's building a message. For what? A response?" Vec blinked, slowly. His lips trembled. "No," he whispered. "It's not sending. It's becoming the message." That did it. That was the moment I started watching Vec differently. Not as the guy chasing patterns, but as someone who might already be part of one. Skell, who had been pacing along the rim of the chamber scanning spores, dropped Polly and marched to Vec, grabbing his collar. "If you're infected, say it. Say it now." "I'm not..." "Don't lie to me!" Skell's voice cracked. "You've been whispering to walls. You haven't slept in 30 hours. You walk like you've got instructions under your skin." Branic stepped forward again. "Back off, Skell. He's compromised. You saw what happened in the gardens. He nearly merged." I raised my hand, signaling them both to stop. "Enough. Nobody's shooting anybody. Not unless something sprouts teeth and tries to swallow us whole." I looked back at Vec. "You still with us?" His eyes drifted for a second, then locked onto mine. Clear. Just tired. "Yeah," he said. "Still here. Just the way it's changing things. It makes sense. Then write it after we survive." We pulled him back up. No apology was exchanged. Branic kept his rifle drawn from that point on. We moved upward through the spire, ascending with grav pads that only half responded to our boots. I don't think it was malfunction. The ship adjusted to our presence, slowing where we needed speed, rushing where we needed care. The kind of interference that's too exact to be random, but too subtle to be sabotage. Halfway up we encountered another one, watching. We found him in a small chamber near the lift junction, a cargo routing station repurposed into a kind of antechamber. The man stood perfectly still, spine straight, arms at his sides. His uniform had fused with his skin, armor plating embedded in muscle. His eyes were completely white, and next to him, standing just behind, just to the right, was another. Identical. Twin. They didn't speak. They didn't move. Until Branic stepped within 4 meters. Then the one in front shifted. Not aggressively. Precisely. He raised his hand and saluted. Branic froze. The motion was exact. Corporate military protocol. 2-finger tap to the temple, hold for 2 seconds, lower to chest. "I trained them that way," Branic murmured. He stepped back. "Walk," he said. "Don't run, just walk." We did. Later, once we made camp again, inside a sealed maintenance alcove, I found Branic cleaning his blade again. Same pattern, same care. I sat across from him. "They remembered your gesture." "Not remembered," he said. "Copied. That wasn't memory. It was reflex. Preserved for function." "Same thing." "No," Branic said, sharper than usual. "Not even close." He looked at me, something brittle in his stare. "My old squad. We had a saying. First rule, secure the perimeter. Second rule, you don't ask about the cargo. That gesture was how we acknowledged an order without comms. We used it in blackout zones to remind each other that we were still human, even when the kill switches started flicking. He sheathed the blade. "If they're using that now," Branic said, not looking at me, "they're not saluting me. They're saluting the ghost of protocol. What's left when the person gets stripped out?" That was when I realized it. The ship wasn't just altering them, it was keeping parts of them, tools, memories, reflexes, because it wasn't trying to destroy humanity, it was trying to use us. We didn't talk much after that. Vec had stopped sketching, but he kept his notebook clutched tight to his chest. Skell hadn't checked Polly in 15 minutes. That was a record. And Branic sat with his back to the corner, eyes never blinking for more than a second. I logged another private note. "The pattern's not passive. The alterations are structured, behavioral as well as physical. It's preserving skills, specific crew functions, service instincts, military protocol, even social cues. The Artemis Solace is being reconfigured into something communicative, something not just functional, but presentational. It's building a vocabulary made from roles, routines, and flesh. We are standing in a message, and it's nearly finished writing itself. I've seen what panic looks like in crews. Small ones. 4 or 5 people sealed in a dying hull with half an atmosphere and no way out. It doesn't come loud, doesn't come fast. It seeps, like coolant through a cracked pipe, a change in breath cadence, a skipped system check, a glance that holds too long. By the time you notice it's happening, it's already too late to contain. We hit that point on the 39th hour. It started with the gravity again, not sudden, but skewed. Up stopped meaning up. My boots stuck to a wall that didn't slope, and Vec stumbled across what had once been a ceiling. Branic barked for Skell to stabilize his harness, but Skell wasn't moving. He was crouched in a corner, goggles off, staring at Polly's screen with his mouth slightly open, silent, wide-eyed with horror. I crossed to him, magnetic boots locking with every step. Slowly, didn't want to spook him. "Skell, what is it?" He didn't blink. He didn't even shift his weight, just held up Polly and rotated the screen toward me. The display showed the deck schematic, original architecture versus real-time scan. The lines didn't match. No surprise there. But the overlays weren't static. They were changing in rhythm. Slow pulses through the spine of the ship, like breathing. Except it wasn't breath. It was timing. "The ship's moving in waves," he said flatly. "Structural modulation. It's flexing its own layout." He reached into his pack and pulled out 3 sealed canisters, each one stamped with the black chevron of a Class 3 biohazard neutralizer. "We should fire the plasma cores now, burn its stem to stern, wipe the deck logs, deny recovery authorization. Nothing in this hull should make it back to inhabited space." Branic turned. His voice was calm. "You're overreacting." "No," Skell replied, still quiet. "I'm just ahead of you." He looked at me. "I know you still think we can find someone to save, maybe even something to reason with. But it's not sick, Osric. It's finished gestating. This thing isn't becoming. It is. And we're standing inside its body." A part of me agreed. But the part that didn't. The part that remembered pulling 14-year-olds out of collapsed methane rigs. The part that stayed awake in evac ships because I couldn't stop hearing screams in my helmet audio. That part needed to know. Needed to see if anyone was still in there. So I made the worst decision of my career. I told them we were going deeper, down into the cargo webworks where the original ship schematics ended and the new construction began. They didn't argue. Not even Skell. I think maybe they already knew there was no climbing back up, only through. We passed through Section Delta 7. Used to be for high-value cargo, luxury modules, rare compounds, elite biotech enclosures. Now it was a cathedral of bones and plating. The deck plating had curled up in places, warped into support arches like the ribs of a great beast. The air tasted alkaline, thin, but not poisonous. Every 40 meters a stanchion rose from floor to ceiling. Welded human spines reinforced with flexible composite struts. Some of them still had vertebral tattoos, crew identifiers. I stopped at one. Small spine. No heavy fusion. Narrow hips. The vertebrae were still lined with vascular sheaths that glistened when light touched them. It was a child. Vec said nothing, just walked ahead. Skell muttered under his breath, something about scale and cost. Branic remained silent, his rifle never lowering. We found the survivor cluster 3 levels below. They were cocooned in architecture, 10 bodies suspended in personal stasis caskets, originally cryopods, now vertically mounted in a spiraled ring. Each pod had been re-engineered, restructured. The lids were transparent, but no longer opened via manual release. Instead, bio-coded panels had been printed over them, and each pod was tethered to the next with conduits of muscle wire and fluid tubing. One of them looked at me, eyes dull, unblinking, but conscious. She was mouthing something, over and over. I moved closer. She wasn't silent, but she had no tongue. The tissue had been repurposed into a binding suture along the base of her jaw. Branic raised his rifle. "You know what I'm going to say," he murmured. I did, but I shook my head anyway. "No. You hesitate now. We lose the core. That signal completes and we've failed the species, Osric. No evac, no second ship, no do-over. They're still alive. They're part of it. Not all the way. Not yet." Branic didn't lower his rifle. Skell stepped forward, vial in hand. His fingers hovered over the manual release switch. "This is containment protocol, Category 4 crossover. We cannot extract them without contamination risk." "You're assuming they're infected." "I'm assuming they're not finished." That line stuck. I turned toward the pod that held the woman. Tapped the side gently. Her eyes tracked the motion. Tracked me. I opened comms. "Branic, if you shoot, you'll do it knowing they're aware, that she's watching." He hesitated. I saw the fracture in his posture. He lowered the rifle. "We carry them. We all die," he said. "Then we don't carry them." Vec turned toward me. "You want to wake them?" "No, I want them to choose." With a stabilizing override rig, I spliced auxiliary power into the pod system to interrupt the link. When I did, the ring of pods dimmed slightly. The conduit slackened. And for a moment, the woman's eyes widened. That was all. But it was enough. We marked the coordinates, set a timed beacon, 15 hours. If we didn't make it to the engine core and shut down the transmission cycle by then, the beacon would send the coordinates to an orbital fire platform and trigger a surgical strike. Total combustion. No remains. We descended 1 level further, and there we found the engine core had once been compact, neutron-cooled, fusion hybrid, state-of-the-art. Now it spanned 5 decks vertically, swollen with scaffolding and dense structural meshwork. Thick girders threaded with repurposed bone and bundled cabling like veins twisted around steel. Cables woven from ligament. Plating fused with vertebrae. Central to it all, the amplification altar. That's what it looked like. Not a reactor, an altar. A slab of interlaced metal and calcified bone surrounded by the bodies of engineers. Suspended, hollowed. Their nervous systems interfaced directly with the chamber's control circuits. Each one still twitched. Each one still worked. I turned to Branic. "Charges." He nodded and pulled the satchel. We started planting. Skell covered the perimeter. Vec was too quiet. He moved like he was underwater. Eyes distant. Focused on something I couldn't see. Then he stopped. Pointed. "There," he said. "Right there." "What is it?" "The core's converging, the structure. It's folding logic into design. If we hit it from above, just above that nodal junction, we can break the whole message sequence." Branic checked the line of sight. "Doable. 1 shot. You'll have seconds." "Then I'll take them." I stepped onto the gantry alone. The scaffolds surrounding the altar trembled, as if they were breathing out. Heat wasn't pouring from the floor. It radiated up through the boots like intention. Each step forward compressed something inside my chest, like my body was recognizing it, stood inside a machine older than memory and smarter than its own skin. The structure curved overhead like the mouth of a bell. Beneath my boots, the plating shimmered. Something underneath the surface shifted when I moved, as though I were walking across a frozen pond, and the thing beneath the ice knew my weight. My mind began to slow, thoughts trying to climb uphill against something unseen, something that moved just fast enough to stay ahead of me. Every breath came shallower than the last. I felt the metal in my jaw plate hum, a deep frequency, subsonic. I reached the base of the altar, a raised plane of bone and alloy and reconstituted tendon webbing, shaped by a purpose no human ever taught it. It wasn't religious, it was precise. A node of translated labor, human reflex retooled into machine function. Crew memories, muscle memory, neural spikes, all aligned to form a living instruction set. The final command in a sentence built from breath, movement, and blood. The torch in my hand felt heavy. I didn't ignite it right away. I looked at the altar. It had no face, no eyes, no display. But something in the arrangement of its surfaces gave me the sense of waiting, as if it was aware that I had arrived at the final point, that the moment had come to accept or reject the last offering. I thought about all of them, the ones we found sealed in walls, the ones building, the ones that still breathed through altered lungs, the woman in the pod who had no tongue but still met my eyes. And I thought about Branic standing back there without asking me to stop. I triggered the torch. The flame bloomed in silence, white-hot and narrow, designed for breaching composite hull plating in low-oxygen environments, and I pressed it into the base. The structure didn't crack. It accepted the torch at first, like it expected incision. Then the scream came. The walls shifted. The scaffolds above began to unspool from their central axis like hair from a severed braid. A network of reinforced conduit, some still slick with bodily fluids, snapped away in convulsions. The altar tried to reconfigure. It began to close around the flame as if swallowing it, trying to redirect the damage into something useful. But it was too late. Something fractured deep in the core. I felt it in the soles of my boots, an asymmetry cascading upward through the deck plating. The harmony broke. The groan that followed was not metal in distress. It was the exhale of a design betrayed. The solace had nearly become something it had no word for, a shape no language could hold. It had been so close to finishing the sentence, and I had torn the last word from its mouth. Below, I glimpsed Branic pulling Vec out from under a collapsing girder. Vec screamed, part instinct, part grief. Skell was already dragging himself toward the tramway, yelling something I couldn't make out through the interference. The pod lights in the chamber behind us dimmed, enough to mark interruption. The message hadn't been deleted, but it was no longer complete. The structure would continue for a while, but without purpose, without syntax. I turned from the altar. Smoke and heat poured from its breach now, curling low like mourning veils torn from unseen heads. We had minutes to run, to leave. Branic had taken a gash across the thigh during the detonation, spilled through armor, not deep enough to cripple, but enough to slow. Vec held him upright without hesitation. The sketchpad was gone, dropped during the collapse or discarded before. Vec wasn't watching the walls anymore. He was watching Branic. Skell was already ahead, hacking the maglock to the transit rail, a semi-functional tram system designed to move heavy cargo modules between the engine decks and external hangars. The doors were half melted, pried apart by something stronger than hydraulics. He didn't care. He carved through the remains with Polly's onboard torch like it was routine. The tram had power, not much, but enough. We shoved inside as the corridor behind us began to deform, walls pressing inward. The ship still didn't lash out like an animal. It reconfigured like a machine adjusting design tolerances. Branic collapsed onto the floor beside a stack of pressure cases. He gritted his teeth, checked the wound, then popped a clot tab from his belt kit and drove it into the gash. The foam expanded with a hiss. He didn't flinch. I keyed the tram forward. The motor whined with uneven torque, then caught. We lurched ahead. Outside the narrow viewing slit, the solace passed by in blurs of rearranged purpose. Corridors that slanted at angles the human eye wasn't built to navigate. Rooms folded open like dissected paper models. Half-constructed torsos embedded into walls, arms locked in positions meant for machines, pulling cables, fusing plating, wiring growth. The transmission node hadn't just been one chamber. It had been a process, seeded across the ship. A distributed algorithm executed in architecture, thought, and memory. It wasn't gone, but it was broken. The tram shuddered once, too hard, and threw us sideways. I hit the floor, braced, rolled, caught sight of a figure just beyond the next junction. A stewardess, or what was left of one, lace-gloved hands wrapped tight around a data core cradle. Her eyes were missing, replaced with smooth lenses, half glass, half organic polymer. The thing she held glowed soft blue, lighting her fingertips like candlelight under ice. She didn't move. She simply turned, faced the hull, and began walking straight into it. Her shoulders bent at unnatural angles, bones split outward, parting skin and fabric. The wall accepted her with utility, as if she had always belonged there. Branic pulled himself up beside me. "How long to the hangar?" 2 minutes if we're lucky. 3 if the rail holds." He nodded. He didn't say goodbye. Just gave me the rifle like he was handing off a weight too heavy to carry anymore. Whatever broke in him during that last breach, he wasn't patching it this time. He was choosing how to end. I stared at him. He wasn't joking. "You're not going to make it that far," I said. He shrugged. "Then I'll buy us 30 seconds. "No." "You hesitate, we all lose." "No." He reached forward and shoved me hard into the wall. Not enough to injure, just enough to remind me what he was, what he'd always been. "Osric," he said, steady. "Sometimes the job is to carry. Sometimes it's to hold the line." Then he turned, walked to the rear exit, took a position, rifle up. The tram passed the last transit ring. I didn't see what happened, but I heard it. One long burst, a pause, 2 more, and silence. We reached the hangar. The doors weren't doors anymore. They had become a radial iris, segmented like the pupil of an invertebrate. Skell braced Polly against the base and discharged the last of her core energy in a directional arc. The segments spasmed, some snapped inward, others folded back. The emergency cutter, the Sparrowhawk, was still there. I didn't stop. I ran diagnostics as I moved. Hull pressure nominal. Life support fouled but tolerable. Engines cold but not dead. I climbed into the pilot harness. Vec strapped in without a word. Skell vomited in his respirator before managing to lock himself into the rear bulkhead harness. I keyed engines. The cutter moaned like a beast waking from sedation. Even the ship's airlock hissed like it resented the departure, like it had expected us to stay, to join, to finish. Something in the solace tried to grip us, not physically, just presence. The kind you feel when your name is being said in another room, quietly. But we broke. The Sparrowhawk detached. We didn't burn out fast. The solace shrank behind us, its shape less a vessel now and more suggestion. The kind of silhouette you recognize not because you've seen it, but because you've dreamed it. There was no transmission, no final signal. The thing it had been building would never speak, but it had gotten close. We drifted for 4 hours before I shut the drives down and let us coast in blackout mode. Vec sat silently, staring at the comm screen even though there was no feed. Skell injected himself with something too strong to be legal and went to sleep upright. I stayed in the pilot cradle. At some point, Vec turned to me. "What do you think it was trying to say?" I didn't know. Or maybe I did, and I just wasn't ready to say it aloud. We had survived, but that wasn't the story. The story was this: we stopped it. Not because we were strong, or smart, or better, but because we saw the moment when mercy had to become refusal. I left a log behind, sealed in the nav core, buried with enough encryption to keep Osiris Gate from scrubbing it clean before someone with sense reads it. It says everything. About the ship, about the crew, about what waits at the edge of mapped space. I didn't log the names. There weren't enough bodies left to match them to. But I remember the shape of Branic's hand on my shoulder the day we docked. I remember Vec going quiet. I remember Skell, of all people, reaching for someone else instead of retreat. That's how I know we didn't lose everything. The log ends with one line. If you find something building itself out of people, don't try to understand it. Don't try to talk to it. Just stop it. Even if it costs everything.